Hey, how's it going, and welcome to another video. So, about a month ago at this point, I did Fallout New Vegas weekend, which was just a weekend of me talking about my favorite Western video game ever made. But it got me thinking about some of the other most anticipated video game releases that I've experienced. I remember the waiting and the anticipation for some of these games is some of the most agonizing shit I've ever dealt with. And it's always kind of interesting just to look back at, a game you were really excited for 5, 10, 15 years ago. Because no matter what, even if the game you were really excited for ends up being, kinda shitty, it at least brings back memories of a particular time. So today I'm going to be talking about 8 of my most anticipated video game releases, some of the hype, I guess, surrounding it, my memories of that time, and if the game lived up to that expectation or not. But this is a lot more about the anticipation of the game than the game itself. And of course, in the comments, leave me some of your most anticipated video games of all time, and if you think it was worth the wait or not. But starting off, I wanted to mention the only console that's on this list, and that is the Wii. Also, it really weirds me out knowing there's probably at least a couple of you watching who don't remember the release of the Wii. Like, God, put me in the retirement home already, but I think for me, the Wii really is one of the only consoles I remember being super excited for, because I'm the type of person who really never gets very excited about console releases. I always care a lot more about the games themselves, but, I feel like starting with the PS4 and Xbox One generation, console wars kind of lost their luster for me. It's like, whatever, a new PlayStation's gonna come out, a new Xbox is gonna come out, and then Nintendo is gonna come up with something. But yeah, the Wii really was just such an exciting and different thing. Like, at the time, the Wii came out in 2006, so I was 9 years old. I hadn't lost the little spark and glimmer in my eyes quite yet, and all I had at the time was the GameCube. I never had a PlayStation or an Xbox. But at the time, the Wii really was such a technologically cool thing for the time. The idea of taking a controller and moving it around and having shit happen in the game was such a foreign idea. And I remember for Christmas that year, the only thing I wanted was a Wii. And you have to keep in mind, this was back when the Wii first came out. This was the fucking great Wii apocalypse of 2006. Nobody could get their hands on this thing. I feel like that's something that's, pretty consistent across time. It's just like people really, or companies, I guess, really underestimating how much, demand there will be for new consoles. We've seen that happen with the PlayStation 5 and the PS4 and the Switch. I don't think it happened with the Wii U, really. But yeah, that was a ferocious era of Wii scalpers, of people camping out to try and maybe get a console. And I'm sure there were many, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands probably, different families just across the world who wanted a Wii and just couldn't get one. But I was fortunate enough, my grandpa actually ended up getting it for me. I don't know how he managed to pull that off. He must have gotten it secondhand off of eBay, but I look back on the Wii, and ironically, it's one of those systems that even though I have such strong memories of its release and the pre-release for it, I really don't have a whole lot of Wii games I'm really attached to. There's a few really good games for that system, but I really wouldn't say that any of my favorite games ever are really on it. But yeah, I thoroughly loved my Wii for the couple of years when it was like my new console until I got my PS3. I love that thing to death, but it's just so funny to think that, way back in 2006, the hunt for a Wii was so frantic and insane, and now most people have 2 just laying around in their house collecting dust. But it's definitely a special little system, I'll give it that much. And speaking of Wii games, now we come to Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Now, Smash Bros. Melee aficionados, I already see you typing out your essay on what's wrong with Super Smash Bros. Brawl. It's really exciting new information that nobody has ever heard before, and it also hasn't been 12 years since the game came out. But Brawl might honestly take the cake for the video game that just throughout my life I was the most excited for its release. Super Smash Bros. Melee was one of my most played GameCube games. I played it a lot. And I have so many vivid memories of the anticipation for the release of Brawl. You know, going all the way back to that first E3 trailer where they revealed like Pit and Meta Knight and Zero Suit Samus and Wario. I remember thinking at the time how absolutely beautiful it looked. I kind of remember thinking, oh man, this is the pinnacle of graphics. Even though looking back now, Brawl has this kind of like funky art style that isn't really super appealing. And I remember every single day after getting off of school, the first thing I would do was I would go and I would check the Super Smash Bros. Dojo for even the slightest crumb of information about new characters, returning characters, stages, assist trophies, whatever it may have been. And you know, this was back in 2008. This was during an era where the internet was a lot less kind of centralized, if that makes sense. You know, you get on YouTube or Twitter or whatever it may be, and it kind of feels like all the information in the world, whether you want to know it or not, is given to you. You know, you learn pretty quick every detail about every new game that's coming out, whether you really want to know it or not, but back then, you kind of had to search for that kind of information. This was back during the days of, like, Game Facts, of, you know, gaming websites being an actual somewhat credible source of information. And so in a lot of cases, if you wanted to know something about an upcoming release, you kind of had to go find it for yourself. And that sure is what I fucking did with Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Like I said, every single day, looking on the dojo for something new. And I remember the night when Sonic was revealed, I honestly feel as if that's maybe the most exciting, like, video game announcement I've probably ever experienced. Because, you know, at the time, I was 10 or 11 years old, I was really into Sonic, and Sonic being in Smash Brothers was like one of those insane person dreams that we could have only imagined back in the day. Which is funny to look back on now that we have Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and it's like, yeah, Ryu and Steve and Pac-Man and Mega Man and Simon Belmont, all these different characters from all these different series are all together. But back then, the idea of Sonic being in a Smash Brothers game was like, it was revolutionary thinking. But yeah, I was mentally salivating for the chance to finally play Super Smash Bros. Brawl. And that game actually ended up getting delayed a few times. I think at least twice it got delayed. Because I remember it was supposed to come out, I think in December at one point, and then it got pushed back to February, and then to March. And I actually ended up going to the midnight release of it with my grandma. I'm pretty sure that was the first midnight release I ever went to. I was like the only kid there. The rest of the people were like teenagers and adults. But I got back home and I had fucking playtime with Super Smash Bros. Brawl. I'm talking all night until I passed out at like 9 in the morning. And you know, when you're a kid of that age, that's pretty impressive. Because you don't really have the same level of mental staying awake power. But yeah, then I would wake up a couple hours later, have more of that hardcore playtime. Dog, I remember there was so much to do. I had a hit list of shit I needed to accomplish. You know, classic mode with every character, all-star with every character, the subspace emissary. I played Brawl until I got literally sick. Because it came out, I might be wrong, I think it was either a Friday or a Thursday when Brawl came out. It might have even been a Saturday, I'm not sure. It was definitely a weekend, but, you know, I played pretty much nonstop the whole weekend until I managed to get myself sick. And then that Monday morning, my mom was like, no, you're going to school, you just want to stay home and play that game. And eventually I convinced her that I legitimately was sick. And then the second she had gone to work or whatever, I was like, alright, time to play more Brawl. But it's honestly hard for me to even put into words the level of excitement I felt for the release of Brawl. It really did, for many weeks and months, pretty much like dominate my brain. And I feel like very few video games before or since have managed to accomplish that. And next up is one, I'm probably not going to talk about this one too much because I just did an entire weekend of videos about it, but it is of course Fallout New Vegas. So I already did a whole video kind of talking about my memories of the lead up to Fallout New Vegas, so if you want to check that out, I would recommend doing so. But man, the anticipation I felt for Fallout New Vegas was on I guess a comparable level to Super Smash Bros. Brawl. I remember watching the initial reveal trailer for it many dozens of times, and just anxiously awaiting its release. But it was another game that similarly occupied pretty much all of my thoughts in the lead up to it. I remember for just months and months anticipating it because, you know, based on my experience with Fallout 3, I knew I was getting into not just like a game that I would play a little bit and be done with, I was getting into a journey, like something that would take me many days to finish and many more weeks and months after to like really comprehensively, like, explore it all. But I didn't realize at the time that it would end up being my favorite Western video game ever made, and I sure as hell didn't realize that that would still be the case 10 years later. But yeah, if you want to hear me talk about New Vegas more, definitely check out some of the Fallout New Vegas weekend videos. I talk about that game a lot in those. So next is Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver, which I will just be referring to as Heart Gold since that's the one I got. But when I was coming up with this list, I was actually kind of stuck in between which one of these I was actually more excited for. Diamond and Pearl or Heart Gold and Soul Silver. I think the stretch from, like, you know, Gen 3 to the end of Gen 4 is the kind of period of Pokemon I was the most excited about. But after thinking it over, I absolutely was a lot more excited for the release of Pokemon Heart Gold. Since this was back in an era of real uncertainty about whether or not Johto remakes were going to be a thing. You know, Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green had come out, but it was kind of like, yeah, those were Kanto games, those are kind of old, maybe Johto won't get a remake. Nowadays, people act like, you know, the Diamond and Pearl remakes are some inevitable thing, but, you know, all we could really do at the time was speculate and hope and pray, I guess. But I remember the day that, like, Heart Gold and Soul Silver were announced, I got home from school, I learned about the announcement, and I had a fucking shit, dude. That was just a very blissful moment, because, you know, I had played the original Gen 2 games and really enjoyed them. And I don't think any Pokemon game before, and probably, like, ever again, will reach that level of pure excitement I felt for it. Because to me now, Pokemon is kind of more just something that's like, you expect it to come out, you know? Very little about it is super exciting. There might be a couple Pokemon that you might find cool, but no, it was very exciting. The lead up for that game coming out was painful. I remember wanting to play it so badly. And I finally got it, and to this day, I still am of the belief that Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver are the best Pokemon games. Like, my favorite is still Emerald, just because of, like, mostly nostalgia reasons, but just from the amount of content in those games, you know, you had all of Johto, all of Kanto, you had the Battle Frontier. But yeah, I would say that Pokemon Heart Gold is absolutely one of the games that kind of lived up to my expectations of it. I do definitely think it's at least the most well-rounded Pokemon game, if that makes sense. But yeah, Pokemon Heart Gold, very good. Still, like, I would say it's probably my second favorite Pokemon game, and still the one that I think is just, like, the most kind of well-made overall. Okay, so this, I feel like, is gonna be kind of the weird anomaly of the list, because, you know, every single other one of these games, I remember there being pretty general sort of hype surrounding it. You know, the rest of these are all pretty big releases, or at least shit that a lot of people are looking forward to, but this is one that's very niche and particular, and that's JoJo's Bizarre Adventure All-Star Battle. For me, this was really a case of it just kind of being, like, the right place and the right time. I got into JoJo's Bizarre Adventure in 2012 when the anime was airing for, like, part 1 and 2. And it was just such an exciting time to get into the series, you know? I had finished watching the part 1 and 2 anime, and I had started reading the manga. And while I was doing that, JoJo All-Star Battle was slowly revealing new characters. And as somebody who was just starting to get into the series, starting to become familiar with these characters, it was very exciting being able to see fucking, I don't know, like, Rohan or whatever, and be like, now I know who that is. And that was a sort of mission of mine, was to read all of what was available of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure before the game came out. I think I was pretty far into part 7 when it came out, so I almost finished my goal, but not quite, But no, it was just a really exciting time to both, like, be a fan of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and to just get into the series in general. That was also the first time that a lot of these characters were given voices, and for whatever stupid-ass last reason, I was really insistent on having a physical copy. Whenever possible, I always like to have physical copies of games. And so I had ordered it from Japan instead of being a smart person and just getting it digitally so I could play it instantly. I had to wait, you know, another 2 or 3 weeks to get the game. And that was a painful experience, knowing it's out. It's just like it's on a plane or a ship or something coming towards me. And I finally got it, and it was like, okay. You know, just as a video game, as like a fighting game especially, it's not great. They eventually patched it to fix a couple of these issues, but it was just like, it was such a slow game. Things did very little damage. There wasn't really a whole lot of like, there wasn't a high skill ceiling to it. You could do some kind of neat stuff, but in general, it was kind of like, you just did a lot of auto combos and stuff. So as a fighting game, it wasn't really great, but as just kind of like a, I don't know, a love letter to JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, it was pretty good. You could tell it was made, like, the people who made the All-Star Battle game had a lot of love and appreciation for JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. There's just so many little details, like, all the characters look really good. There's all kinds of little Easter eggs and, like, you know, tributes to the series and the menus, and, you know, the soundtrack has a couple of different little homages to the musical, like, inspirations for a lot of these characters. There's all these different costumes in it from the series, and it's just like, you can tell that at the very least, it was made with love. And those super attacks, man, I still get a kick out of all the different super attacks from JoJo All-Star Battle. And even though the thing itself is of mixed quality, I feel like, to me, just the memories I have surrounding it and how it kind of accentuated my excitement for JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, that to me is kind of, in a way, more important than the game itself. This is like a common trend with all these, but it feels really weird knowing that JoJo All-Star Battle came out 7 years ago. It's like, I really don't feel like that much time has passed, dude. I'm old. But yeah, All-Star Battle, even though I would say just as a video game, it kind of didn't live up to my expectations, I definitely don't regret the hype. I feel like that's something that happens pretty often, is where, like, a game comes out and you're like, oh, I kind of overhyped this, and then you sort of regret the hype, you know? I really don't regret the excitement that I had towards it in the slightest. So next up is Metal Gear Rising, and Metal Gear Rising has a very interesting kind of development history. And I, in turn, have kind of an interesting history with Metal Gear, so anybody who's, like, really into Metal Gear, this statement will make you cringe, but I started with Metal Gear Solid 4. In my defense, I literally didn't know any better. Like, Metal Gear Solid 4 came with my PS3. And so I played it, obviously, you know, it's a game to play, whatever. And I was like, what? Like, eventually I did finish it. I didn't understand a single thing that was going on. And then I kind of went backwards and ended up playing Metal Gear Solid 1, and then I went through 2, and then 3. And at the time, the kind of future of Metal Gear was very up in the air. You know, Metal Gear Solid 4 was intended to be the last game. And then what was revealed was Metal Gear Solid Rising. A game where you played as Raiden, and you could pretty much cut anything. It was like, oh, dog, because, you know, anybody who's played Metal Gear Solid 4 knows Raiden was the coolest motherfucker in that game. And the idea of being able to play as him was very enticing. You know, the little tech demo or whatever it was that they showed off was really, really cool looking. And it was just like, oh man, what a cool looking game this is turning out to be. Like, you play as Raiden, you can cut up whatever. It was described as, I think it was like hunting stealth is how it was kind of described, which sounded really cool. And it was just like, alright, this sounds baller. And then there was kind of just nothing. Apparently, it was basically, like, kind of soft canceled in 2010 due to just, like, problems getting the concept of the game to work in general. And that was when the Saviors Platinum Games decided to take up development on it. And that was a real sort of, oh, thank God kind of moment, because, like, just stop and think for a second, if Metal Gear Rising ended up getting the Silent Hills treatment, where it's just like, oh yeah, here we go, like, coolest video game concept ever. Nope. You know, imagine if that happened to poor Kojima twice. But yeah, it was saved by Platinum Games. They started working on it. And when it finally came out, dog, I loved this game. Yeah, if you happen to see last year's video on, like, my favorite video games from each year in the 2010s, this was my favorite game from 2013. Just, God, what a fun entertaining video game. It's one of those kinds of games that just fills me with this, like, childlike sense of delight and wonder at, you know, just watching the goofy insanity of it all. It's one of those games where whenever I see, like, somebody put up on YouTube like, oh, my first playthrough of Metal Gear Rising, I watch that shit immediately because people's reactions to the shit is so funny. I mean, it's just so satisfying to chop people up, to go into Zandatsu mode and chop people's spines out. The bosses are so good. I really do think it's like the best boss lineup of pretty much any game from like the PS3 era. The soundtrack is amazing. I feel like it's also the best set of boss music for like a game of that era, pretty much. And it's just like, man, I'm glad this game came out. Even though people are dying for Metal Gear Rising 2, and you know, that seems like something that might never happen just because of what's going on with Konami and Kojima. And then Platinum Games is like another whole developer they'd have to get involved. So it's just like, it's just a messy situation, but I'm just happy it came out, you know? So yeah, Metal Gear Rising absolutely lived up to my expectations, even if it's not like the deepest, most intricate, you know, action game ever made. It's fun. Like, to me, that's what matters the most. Alright, now, this is the big boy. I would assume this is the one that you're all the most familiar with, and it is, of course, Persona 5. Without a doubt, out of all of these games, Persona 5 is the one that I've went on the longest journey with. You know, some of these games I was waiting on for a year or 2 years or however long it was, but I was waiting on Persona 5 for 4 years. So Persona 5 was first revealed back in 2013, and it freaks me out to think about this, but that was 7 years ago. I so vividly just, like, I remember being in that kind of mindset of waiting for Persona 5 to come out. Because I got into Persona in the summer of 2012, and I think at the time the most recent thing that had come out for Persona was Persona 4 Arena. There might have been some other thing, but I remember anxiously awaiting the announcement of Persona 5, and then it finally happened on this stream they did where they announced Persona Q and Persona 4 Dancing, and then they finally teased Persona 5. Of course, it was gonna come out in 2015, and then that did not happen. And then it was gonna come out in 2016, and for us, like, English speakers, that didn't happen. And I think out of all the games on this list, this is definitely the one that caused me the most, like, lingering anxiety. Because, you know, for most games, it's a feeling of excitement, right? It's like, oh man, this thing is coming out, I can't wait, I'm excited. Persona 5 made me nervous, because it was like, it felt like every announcement they had, they would show off something really, really cool and some new character or whatever, and also they would hit us with the, yeah, but also wait another 6 months. It was like, it's really painful. And it's weird now that I'm actually trying to describe kind of the hype leading up to it, and I'm at a loss for words, just because it's like, it was such an all-encompassing thing when it came to just like my life in general waiting on this game. It's kind of like asking your grandpa to just describe the war he fought in. It's like, dog, a lot happened. But after all that time waiting, it finally came out. I remember the day it came out, I actually had, like, class. I was in college at the time. And so I had the game at my house, just waiting to be played. I think I managed to get through like the first few minutes, and then I had to make for school. But yeah, over the years, we made I think a video or two about Persona 5. Yeah, I mean, just for many months. That was pretty much just like the game that my kind of life revolved around. It was just talking about that game, discussing it. And this is like a weird thing to say, but I feel like I, in some fucked up way, like, enjoyed the anticipation of Persona 5 more than the release of it after. Because, like, when Persona 5 was coming out, pretty much everybody was excited for it. And nowadays, it's just like, there's just so much kind of bitterness surrounding Persona 5. It's like, it's not as fun to talk about anymore, you know? Between the die-hard, crazy Persona 5 obsessed people and the really, really unhappy people who don't like it, it's just like, you know, just the act of, like, talking about Persona 5 as a thing isn't as fun anymore. Like, I still haven't played Persona 5 Royal pretty much because of that reason. Ironically, this is the game that, like, I feel like I was the most excited for, that I also ended up being kind of the most burnt out on. But nobody's ever gonna be able to tell me that I didn't enjoy Persona 5, you know? I feel like that's sadly something that happens way too often these days, is like, people are under this kind of assumption that, you know, something has flaws, therefore why do you like it? You know, don't ever let anybody tell you that your experience with something like you didn't have fun, or that you're not attached to the game or the characters or the story or whatever it may be. I don't know, I might end up making that just like a topic for its own video about like enjoying things regardless of if people tell you it's shitty or whatever. But yeah, Persona 5, the hype for it was like legendary. The anxiety that kind of hype brought on was nerve-wracking. And I will say, for absolute certainty, Persona 5, out of all the games and things on this list, Persona 5 is the one that had the most impact on my life. Met a lot of people from it, had a lot of good memories surrounding it. When I say it lived up to the hype, I feel like in Persona 5's case, it's kind of like, it was almost impossible for it to do that. You know, out of the games on this list, this is absolutely the one that people I think had the most kind of bloated expectations of. I still need to play Royal. Fucking Royal came out in like March. I still have not played it. I feel like I'm definitely ready at this point. It's like, I've gone enough time not being on Twitter and not having just the constant influx of Persona 5 information and like arguments flooding into my mind. So I think I'm ready to have some fun with these characters again. Yeah, that was a long-winded one. That one went all over the place. But yeah, Persona 5, maybe the most important game on this list, is definitely one of them. So I'll give it that at the very least. Alright, here we are at the final game that I have, like, a particular memory of being super, super, super hyped for. And that is Dragon Ball FighterZ. Now, Dragon Ball is maybe my favorite, just, like, multimedia franchise ever. To me, Dragon Ball is, like, it's the accumulation of, you know, the anime, the manga, the movies, the video games, and just kind of everything surrounding it working together. And over the past, like, basically my entire life, Dragon Ball games have been very hit or miss. You know, you've had some pretty good games out there, and then you've had some, like, trash stinker shit, like fucking Ultimate Tenkaichi and Dragon Ball Sagas. So it's very peaks and valleys with this series, and the one thing that for the longest everybody was wanting was a proper Dragon Ball fighting game. You know, we had shit like the Budokai games, and those are like, they are fighting games, but they aren't really designed with any kind of competitive play in mind. So for the longest, that was the dream, right? Was, we want a real Dragon Ball fighting game, and then people would toss out, you know, just like crazy ideas like, oh man, what if ArcSys made it, you know? And that's kind of how it was for a while. You know, we assumed we would be getting a lot more of the kind of 3D anime fighters like the Xenoverse games, which I do like, but, you know, we felt like it was time for that fighting game, baby. And then it was finally announced. Dragon Ball FighterZ. 3v3, developed by ArcSys, beautiful graphics, fucking Dragon Ball. It really was one of my kind of dream games come true. And from the moment it was revealed, I was like, dog, I am in. Just God, what an exciting kind of release period. Like, looking forward to all the character reveals was so exciting. And I think something that made it really fun was the fact that Marvel Infinite was, like, being hyped up at around the same time. So it was just this really funny duality of, like, kinda shitty-looking game with a lot of characters missing that people have, like, a lot of issues with. And then you look over there and it's like, oh, dream game, right? So that was just fun to watch the kind of shit show going on between the two games, but I remember I so desperately wanted to play the fucking Dragon Ball FighterZ beta. And a friend of mine managed to get in, shout out to Haza, he managed to get into the beta, and we came up with this scheme where I would go onto his, like, PSN account, download the beta client, and play it on my own shit, and to our amazement, it actually worked. And I had a lot of fun with it. I really, really enjoyed it. And so it came out, and I think it's, like, my second most played fighting game. The Guilty Gear Xrd games, if you kind of lump those all together as one, that's definitely my most played, like, game overall. But FighterZ is a pretty close second. Like, I was playing FighterZ, especially with friends, all the time. And it was just such a fun thing to have. Even though it definitely wasn't the deepest fighting game in the world, it was still very satisfying. Just being, you know, a tangible thing that I could sit there and play. Yeah, 3v3, Dragon Ball fighting game. You know, all the reveals for all the different DLC characters were so exciting. Even the ones that, like, I expected to be kind of lame, like base Vegeta and Goku, ended up being some of the coolest characters in that game. And even though I stuck with it for a while, eventually you kind of reach this point for fighting games, or at least I do, where your interest in it starts to wane. A new character would come out, and instead of immediately hopping in to play as them, I would just kind of be like, oh, that's cool. And you know, the longer I went without playing, the bigger the kind of skill gaps started to get between me and everybody else who was playing it. I remember I had taken pretty much a hiatus from it from like a little bit before GT Goku came out to the start of Season 3, and I went online expecting to like do okay, and I got fucking crushed, dude. So that was pretty demotivating, but I definitely enjoyed my time with Dragon Ball FighterZ a lot. Even though some of the balancing, or I guess I should say lack of balancing, because that fucking game would only get like a balance patch once every year or once every half a year. So, you know, if a character was really, really powerful and dominant, you better just hope that within the next year they end up getting nerfed. The only other fighting game I can think of that it really, really made me that excited was like Guilty Gear Xrd Rev 1. I was tempted to put that on this list, but I definitely feel as if my excitement for fighters was a lot higher. So yeah, that has been the video. Thank you for watching. This went in all kinds of weird, random directions talking about different shit. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to let me know some of your most anticipated video games and if you think it was worth the wait or not. And I'll see you guys next time.